new concept or technology. Siva, you cannot hear anything. Please log in and out because it's definitely audible. I've got confirmation from Kim and Tanya. Right, so solid state drive, you need to know what is the difference between a hard disk drive and a solid state drive. Now, this question always comes out either in systems technology, question 9 or question 10. Now, boys and girls, you need to know that HDD is basically becoming old technology as compared to SSD, the solid state drive. Why? Because you need to know the concepts that it's faster. It's one of the disadvantages, as we can say, it's more expensive. It's non-mechanical. That means it cannot break easily as compared to HDD as the previous technology that was in laptops, in your phones, on your iPads, on your tablets, etc. And you need to know that it's shock resistant. Now, if you come to the analogy or the understanding of what a solid state drive, you can see the compactness of how this new solid state drives have been built. You can see that it's soldered components onto the motherboard, onto the chip, and all these chips are basically soldered for basically shock absorbance and less fragile as compared to a hard disk drive. Now, what you need to understand, boys and girls, is what is a solid state drive? You may be asked 2 marks off to define what's an SSD. It may appear in a match column A, B, or it may appear as advantage or disadvantage, which we'll cover in a moment. Right, now you need to know that a solid, or it's a storage drive with no moving parts. It's much quieter and more robust as compared to HDD. Right, they operate much faster than traditional hard drives as they store data electronically and not magnetically as the traditional hard drive. Right, why is it needed in the new technology concepts? Because obviously it's faster access speed. It's basically used as a larger storage system, right? Faster loading as your startup from your BIOS and your operating system files, and obviously improves the general performance as compared to a normal hard drive in terms of storage space. Now, when you come to it, how does it work? We don't need to know the inside of how it works. So basically an understanding of what the SSD is, it just uses microchips. So basically you understand that it has no moving parts as compared to a hard disk drive. It uses flash memory, right? So we basically not going to go into how it works, but what is important, boys and girls, are the advantages and disadvantages. You need to know at least 2 or 3 of these concepts under solid state drive. So if the question paper is going to ask you list 2 advantages of an SSD over an HDD, yeah, easy. You can say there the read-write speed is faster, and obviously the performance is better performance and faster access speed as compared to an HDD. Now, don't just say cheaper, better, faster. You need to explain the whole concept or your definition, your advantages, quite informatically, basically. You need to write. You can't just say cheaper, better, faster, because we're not going to mark this in the exams. Although it's faster, we know that, but you need to substantiate to say that the read-write speed or the data access is faster, right? So it's less likely to get damaged because of no moving parts. So you can't say it's less fragile. You need to say why, because it has no moving parts. You'll get another mark for that. Then it's silent, it has no moving parts. So basically, as compared to a hard drive, so it's that's another advantage and will be accepted in the exam. Disadvantages of this, it's more expensive. So you're going to obviously say that it's not cheaper, better, faster. It's more expensive as per gigabyte of storage space. But obviously the prices are becoming lower in this year and moving forward. Right, and obviously it's almost impossible to do data recovery from SSD if it's damaged. So these are the advantages, disadvantages, and Sean asked, do we have to substantiate according to the mark allocation? Yes, Sean, you have to. If it's 2 marks, you got to give either the 2 advantages that we went through now, or you got to give the 2 disadvantages. And as I said, you can't say cheaper, better, faster. You got to motivate your answer with substantially to get those 2 marks for in an exam situation. Right, so one of the questions that was posed in the past papers, which this will be shared with you, but Due to time, we're only going to cover 1 or 2 questions on this concept. And one of the questions in the 2020 paper asked, give one possible reason why an SSD is specified for the computer instead of a hard disk drive, for 1 mark. So you could have either given any of these 4 or 5 answers. You could have said reduced noise level. You could have said it's faster data access, not just faster. And then you could say reduced power requirements as compared to HDD, or less prone to physical damage, is more durable. So this would have been accepted in an exam where you would have substantiated your answer for the 1 mark as well. Another question quickly with, I'm going to move to a 2-mark question. This appeared in 2018. So you can see that this SSD is tested quite a long time now, and it's still relevant. And give 2 reasons why modern mobile devices are more likely to have built SSDs instead of HDDs. Because obviously they use less power than HDDs, they have better transfer rates, the technology is more up to date, they're less prone to breakage or impact, and obviously the physical size is smaller and lighter and generates less heat. So the understanding, once you understand the difference between HDD and SSD, you basically can motivate your answers when you're actually doing this question paper here. Right, so there are a few questions in this presentation which will be shared with you by your teachers. Please go through all the questions that you could gain in that concept of SSD. Now that was quite manageable or easy to understand. The next concept is a card reader. And I'm quickly going to go through this, and we all know what's Christoph asked, will the presentation be available? Yes, Christoph, in terms of the new concepts or theory, it will be shared, as well as the recording and the all this week's presentations with the practical as well. Right, a card reader. This is what a card reader is. A definition is basically connected to a computer to accept and read data from different types of storage media, such as your SD cards, your flash drives, and your SIMs. Right, why is it needed? Basically, as some of the components or devices don't have USB interfaces. So basically the card readers became more effective, in which where they could actually put in an SSD card or memory card or into the card reader itself, like that. Right, so what are some of the, how it works? So we don't really need to go into the dynamics of the technicality of how it works, but basically know what the concept is, and obviously know it's a physical connection between your computer or your device and your the reader itself. It utilizes a USB interface for data transfer, and obviously facilitates communication. Now, what's important here is your advantages and your disadvantages again. So all these concepts here, boys and girls, you'll see that there's advantages and disadvantages comes up quite often. As long as you understand two or three of these, you'll be able to gain at least the maximum mark in your theory paper coming in November. Advantages: card readers transfer images to computer faster than transferring from a digital camera, for an example. And instead of using Bluetooth or other connectivity, it's much faster. And then card readers consume little energy or power, and it can be transferred to the PC without the camera being present, basically. So it's just a card slot, an SSD card that will slot into the card reader. Right, some of the disadvantages are not one size fits all. It's not. Some single cards and some are multiple readers. So that's a disadvantage. Frequent use of a card reader can damage the memory card if mishandled. And obviously you see that slot is quite small, whether it's on your laptop or whether it's on your phone or whether it's on your tablet, you know that these slots are quite small. And obviously if it's mishandled, it can be damaged quite easily. And obviously it can be cumbersome to carry an external card reader around to use on a USB port as well. Right, some of the past question papers that we extracted is basically some of the questions that could be asked is state 2 ways in which data that's stored on an SD card in a camera can be transferred to a personal computer. Right, so this is way back in 2018, but obviously still part of the new concepts in which you need to study and you need to go through. And 2 marks, you could have answered, it connects the camera to the PC via USB cable, it uses a connector to the PC, or it uses wireless data transfer of the camera, example, the Bluetooth, NFC, or Wi-Fi. And then transfer to cloud and to download to PC also was accepted. And obviously you can insert the SD card into a PC or card reader as well. Right, this was just one mark from 2021 paper. It was the SSD card on your camera is full. Which device would you use to upload the photos to your computer without connecting your camera to the computer? And obviously that is the card reader itself, or card slot was accepted there as well. Right, there weren't many questions on card readers, but if we, there's other resources that's attached to the presentation which you can use before you actually write your exam. Right, the multi-touch screen. We know this is quite an easy concept to understand because it's quite relevant in our smartphones and our tablets, our laptops, and as you see on the screen here. I'm not going to go through what it is and why it's needed. Obviously, this is quite self-explanatory. It's basically allows you to register touches simultaneously. And why is it needed? So basically on your new devices like your smartphones, laptops, and tablets, it's basically, it works with your trackpads or your touchpads and your touchscreen interfaces there, right? I think what's also important is here, it's the expanding or the interface options of a touch screen. Rather than simply swipe and tap, a multi-touch allows you to zoom, scroll, select, etc. So there's quite a few functionalities of your multi-touch screen device, and we don't really need to know how it works in actual fact. Please read through this as well and go through that. And then what's important is the advantages and disadvantages of this concept here. It will be tested and it will come up in some format in terms of either a match column A with B. It will come up in question 4, which is the system software technology, or it might come up in question 9 in your integrated scenario. And you'll see last year's paper, there was a POS point of sale device, and it used a touch screen, and questions of the touchscreen were based on this concept here as well. Right, so you need to know that obviously some of the advantages, it offers more functionality without using menus. It can allow multiple users to interact through the same screen, enhancing your game applications, for example. So if you substantiate with specific examples as well, we will mark it if it's in context or relevance to that concept there of a multi-touch screen. Right, what is the disadvantage? Is there's a limit as to how many physical touches are possible on a small screen. Right, some of the questions that came up in past papers of 2022, for an example, give 2 disadvantages of using multi-touch screens. And for 2 marks, you could have mentioned that it can be inaccurate when wearing gloves, or when your user has wet fingers, or your screen becomes dirty or smudged, and it can obviously impact on the input or the accuracy of your input when you're trying to touch the screen. And another disadvantage of it is cumbersome to input large amounts of data to make corrections. Now imagine you had a whole spreadsheet on your phone of say 4 sheets attached to it, and you had to obviously manipulate data between those sheets. It would be very difficult or cumbersome to manipulate large amounts of data to make corrections, filter, use any other functions on your phone. So these are disadvantages, boys and girls. Please go through them. Right, another question that came up from 2019 June paper as well. Give 2 reasons why touchscreens are commonly used in portable devices. And obviously these are the advantages. More intuitive to use. The navigation is easier because the input is it makes it easier, or the navigation like swiping, trace typing, pinching, zooming, and all those stuff. Right, and then obviously it can be used in smaller devices as well, like your phones. There's no need for physical keyboard. It's both input and output. Right, so the next concept, colleagues, I'm almost coming to the end because I'm at 10 to 3 already, and I'm going to hand over to Ms. Makola just now, is your HDMI. Now, you may be asked, what is the expanded abbreviation of HDMI? You need to know it's called High Definition Multimedia Interface. Right, so it hasn't been tested where the acronym had to be expanded before, but we never know of how the examiners will test. Please understand the acronyms of HDMI or any other concept that will be abbreviated as well. Right, what is HDMI? We all know this. We're quite familiar with what it looks like and where it will fit into your device. What's important as well, how's it used in our daily lives? We know that we use it at our laptops, we use it as our data projectors, our DSTV top box is used, our PlayStations, our soundbar. So basically everything in this day and age is basically converted from obviously our VGAs to HDMI connection here. We need to know that it's just basically a standard port for connecting high definition video devices, such as your monitors, your projectors, and digital television. And what's most important here, boys and girls, is that it carries high quality video and audio signals as compared to previous technology as well. Right, why do we need it? Is because it will carry both video and audio signal from a device. And it's frequently used to connect a laptop to a projector or a television or a smart box, whatever the connection is needed. Right, advantages, disadvantages again. So boys and girls, you can see that advantages, disadvantages are coming up often in terms of these concepts. As long as you can learn two of these advantages and two disadvantages, and you cover these concepts, you'll see that you will actually gain these marks in your theory paper for these new concepts here. Right, so advantages, higher quality. It enables less lossless transmission, better quality video at low brightness, and higher resolution as compared to previous technology as well. It has the ability to transport a high bandwidth of data, that is your video, audio. Now 3D and Ethernet also uses the single cable HDMI as well to transfer high bandwidth of data as well. Right, for the average consumer, they can connect the TV, the DVD player on your home entertainment system. And disadvantages, boys and girls, is the switching delays. Sometimes your blank screens can be caused due to authentication delays. There can also be screen flashing errors with your HDMIs. And then the physical cable with the bandwidth limit of 10 gigabytes per second or 4K is still required. So the upgrades are being done, but that is basically, Marty says it's only on my screen that's stuck at question 4.10.3. Kim, can you see my screen on the advantage, disadvantage?
Hi, Natasha. Yes, I just said reply to the person to have a look and to log out and log in. I think it's a network problem.
Definitely, yeah. Thanks so much, Kim. So boys and girls, again, HDMI, although we know that it's audio, video signals, what it's used for, we need to know advantages and disadvantages of that as well. Some of the past question papers that came up here is true and false question for HDMI. HDMI cables transfer only video signals, and you can see that that's incorrect, and obviously it's VGA. Or if you had to put it the other way around, you could say it's actually false because it transfers both video and audio signals. So you got to read the question specifically and see as well in a true and false question, what is the concept that you need to correct as well. Right, and then another question, the HDMI port on a computer carries both video and audio and video, and that's true. So either way, like this here, you can see that from the definition, from the advantage and the disadvantage, a question can be posed like this as well. Right, I'm not going to go through this as well. It's covered in your in the advantages and disadvantages. It came up in November 2019. Please go through these questions, boys and girls. There are quite a few questions embedded into this presentation, which you can use to facilitate your revision program when you're studying the new concepts document. Right, 3D printers, we all know that this is quite relevant. And as I showed you in last year's paper as well, in question 10.4, that whole scenario was based on a primary school or a nursery school. And the 3D printer came into play here in that question, and at least 7 to 10 marks was based on the scenario based on new terminologies. And there was at least 6 marks from 3D printers. So what you need to know, boys and girls, here is that obviously your 3D versus old printers basically, or laser inkjet printers. Remember that your laser versus 3D, they could ask you questions based on the comparison of it. But what is actually the definition of a 3D printer? It creates 3-dimensional compact objects from a digital model. So you'll design the digital model on your computer, and obviously you will put it into layers, and you obviously put in the material, whether it's PVA, whether it's whatever material you're using, it will basically layer by layer produce the image or the 3D that you've created onto your software in terms of producing something like this on your screen. Right. You need to know now where it's used in our everyday life. It's used quite at a large scale in this day and age. It's your motor vehicles, clothing, buildings. There's phenomenal. There's human parts or human tissue replacement by 3D printing as well. Here, boys and girls, advantages, disadvantages. Now you need to know at least 2 or 3 of the advantages or 2 or 3 of the you don't need to go and study all of them. As long as you can understand 3 or 2 of these, you will get your maximum mark of 2 or 3 marks in this question. Advantages, 3D printing is much cheaper than other manufacturing methods. Now don't say it's cheaper. You will get 0 for that. You got to say as compared to previous or other manufacturing methods. And then obviously in the context of it, it enables home users to have access to machines. They can build 3D models, and then parts needed for the project can be made on demand, because obviously you can print it, you can 3D print it, and obviously it can simulate a physical model before manufacturing or building starts. It's a miniature basically of what you're going to actually design on paper. Disadvantages, quite a few disadvantages here which came out in last year's paper. It can take a long time to print 3D models for 3D printers. To print one object that you've seen on the previous screen will take at least 2 hours to print. Right, limited materials, and obviously it uses the form of plastic for the models or PVA or whatever material they use. It's quite limited. And then obviously they're relatively expensive consumables for 3D printing. And obviously it's time consuming as a multiple part at a larger model. And then emissions may possibly be toxic or smelly in odor. This part here, or this disadvantage, was related to the scenario in last year's question 9 paper as well for the primary school. What's the disadvantage of having a 3D printer in the classroom of a nursery school? And one of the answers that were accepted is that it may be toxic for the smaller learners or for the learners exposed to the emissions from the 3D printer. Right, past papers, I'm also going to not go through this. So boys and girls, you're going to go through these questions and you're going to see how it was tested in past papers. Now we've included questions from 2018 up to up to last year, 2021 and 2022 as well. You can see here, this was the trophy questions of the 3D printing in one of the papers, June paper in last year as well. Okay, this was also last year's paper, November, straight from November paper last year. Is this what I talk about? Mrs. Kamalo and the daycare center or the primary school. What can she use it for? She can print models, she can print educational toys. So boys and girls, remember the scenario context has to be, obviously, your answers has to be directed to the scenario. So important concept here as well. Please read the scenario before answering. It's not just asking for two methods of a 3D printer. You got to relate this to in terms of your scenario, Mrs. Kumalo. Right, I think my time is actually going quite fast. 2023 June paper as well. A question was on 3D printer. So quite a relevant concept. NFC, your near field communication, is basically, what's the definition? It's a wireless technology that allows two-way communication. Your NFC activated on your phone. If you actually put it at a point of sale device, it will activate the NFC or near field communication for payments. Right, how does it work? Basically on radio frequencies, but you got to know the shorter distance of NFC. It's not like Bluetooth or infrared or wider radio wave technology. It's a short distance for radio frequency technology is here as well. Advantages, disadvantages. Please go through this. I've only put 3 and then 1 disadvantage. But if you look at your guideline, which your teacher shared with you as well, when you're studying, you can actually go to NFC. For an example, I'm going to end now. And you see on page 10, if you go to page 10, and then you'll see that there's more, there's extra disadvantages and advantages that you can actually go through in this presentation here as well. So boys and girls, this is basically an explanation of all these definitions. Your teacher should have given you this document at the beginning of last year already, because some of these concepts are also in grade 11 as well. So boys and girls, I've come to the end of this concepts, which is the NFC and the last part of it. I'm going to hand over to Ms. Makola, and we will share